My name is John Fay, and I'm the co-founder and director of Share Value Africa. And first of all, I'd like to thank the GSBI for putting on this program over the past 6 months, and as well as the fantastic support we've received from our mentors, George and Melanie, who are on this call as well today. So thanks to both the GSBI and the mentors. This has been a very valuable process for us. To jump right in, the mission of Shared Value Africa is to enhance lives in Africa by reducing the total costs of meeting basic energy needs. In the pictures you see on the first slide, they are showing essentially what the first picture is the current situation where charcoal is providing an awful lot of the energy needs within urban environments. And then moving down the continuum, how we're going to approach that is working through existing networks and institutions to make people aware of other options and alternatives, and then actually having it be put into use and adopted. Next slide, please. Yeah, okay, thanks. So basically with our value proposition, I'm not going to read it, but what we're attempting to do is combat what we call the poverty tax. And that's that the poor pay a lot more than anyone else for their basic and essential services. And the most egregious offender of that, we believe, is energy and the household energy use, particularly with cooking, but also with lighting and other energy needs. So our approach at SVA is to make low-cost alternatives available to meet the basic energy needs through our criteria, what we call AAA, which is appropriate, being the technology that we're introducing, acceptable, that's to the end user, and affordable, either via financing or just a straight-up purchase, both at the initial as well as ongoing cost. So within our approach, we're very much focused on helping low-income communities meet their basic energy needs. Next slide, please. So essentially the reason, as I was saying before, we believe the cost of energy for low-income communities being the most egregious of all the poverty taxes is it's a major, major worldwide problem. As you can see from this target market, it's affecting nearly 3 billion people globally. Within Africa, where we're focused, over 650 million people. And then specifically what we're going to be talking about and is where Shared Value Africa is launching has launched is in Senegal. And there we believe that from the data available in our own surveys that 1.3 million households are essentially meeting their needs for energy in a way that's extremely harmful to health. Science Journal said that more people die from indoor cooking than from malaria, for example, as well as what we think is the biggest problem is the household economics of it. People are paying not more than you or I as a percentage of their income basis, but literally to meet their household energy needs. And we believe that needs to change if we're ever going to be able to break the cycles of poverty that are affecting the communities that we're targeting. So throughout this presentation, we're also working in Zambia, where we're primarily focused in our launching and piloting with Senegal at the moment. Next slide, please. Now, breaking down the Senegalese market, we break it into 3 different groups: the rural, the peri-urban, and the urban, as it's coming up now. And we think that there's major opportunities in each. Within provision of energy, a lot of the adoption and non-adoption reasons are quite similar throughout the 3 categories. However, the nuances of the drivers of each are a bit different in the actual fuel use. Well, all of the groups that we're targeting are using traditional biomass, or also called primary biomass. They're using different types. The urban and the peri-urban are increasingly using charcoal, while the rural is using collected firewood, which has different drivers and approaches to get to both. I won't go through each adoption and non-adoption for time reasons, but some of the main reasons for it is that it is significantly cheaper. However, there's a high upfront cost. So those are some of the things that we're battling. I won't go through each in depth, but that's the primary one that we'll point out. But there's other things that are quite difficult to overcome and have affected other programs that are attempting to do similar things, is the not having an appropriate or acceptable product. So those are some of the things we really focus on up front. Next slide, please. So basically within the enablers, as I was saying before, we really believe that upfront cost and access, both to market access to the appropriate and acceptable product, and finance are really key things, as well as resistance to change. Cooking habits in particular have been learned over a very long time, and to go in and attempt to change how cooking habits are done, we believe is a recipe for failure. So what we're attempting to do is look much more at how to enable the same cooking practices just at a much lower energy usage way. And that's the way that we're primarily focusing on our approaches going forward. And the other thing that we're trying to leverage as an asset is there's, in the areas that we work, particularly in Senegal, there's an awful lot of existing networks and organizations that have very good organizational capabilities. And those are the types of groups that we've been reaching out to for over the past 2+ years to leverage their networks to get the distribution moving, both not just from a pilot scale, but from at a large-scale distribution. And the other thing that we think is a very good asset is if you really listen to your end customers and get them the products that they want. There is an aspect of people wanting to have aspirational products. Low-income communities in Africa, in either the townships or the slums or the compounds, or how they're called, wherever you may be, people still are interested in aspirational products. They may not be able to buy the Mercedes or the BMW, but they can certainly have a higher-end stove that they can be proud of and can be able to use at their house. So that's something that we're really focused on as well, and we believe that that's a particular asset of the approach we're using. Next slide, please. Now, essentially within our business model and across the value chain is we are working, as I think Mike mentioned before, across the ecosystem here, because we think that there's a number of gaps that actually force us to actually do that. So within the products that we're doing, it makes a very large difference if you're going to be importing them or if you're going to be able to make them locally. Our preference is to make the product locally, but obviously certain products aren't eligible to do that, so we look to then import them and then using as much local content as possible. So as you can see, we do an awful lot of sourcing. On our initial products are solar lighting products that would be imported from China, an appropriate stove or high-efficiency stove that we have been working with manufacturers to tailor to the Senegalese needs out of South Africa, and then the actual fuel substance itself and an EcoSac heat retention cooking bag that we can be 100%, both can be 100% manufactured in Senegal. So from there, what the organization will do is manage the process of the inventory control and then work with, as I was saying before, the existing networks and institutions that we've set up across the whole spectrum, from micro franchising, which is the key approach that we'd like to engage with, community-based organizations, the women's groups called Tantines in Senegal, setting up our own wholesale eco-boutiques, as we're calling them, which these groups will then be able to access the products from, and then microfinance institutions from the financing, as well as distribution sides. But we're still working out exactly what type of model we'd like to work with MFIs due to the high costs or interest rates that are often charged. The next bit that we think is extremely important is the actual point of sale, and that's going to be quite different between the urban and rural contexts. And it really has to be customer approved. Otherwise, the product will have no chance, and our organization would have an awful hard time moving forward. So we really focus on the user feedback and have been doing so in our design phase for the last 2 years with numerous community consultations, in-home consultations, testing the products, putting the products in homes, getting the feedback, and changing the products. And as you can see there, that we take that back to what we call as our AAA product criteria. So next slide, please, which I don't think it'll switch the slides, but it will. Essentially, just to give you an example of one of these examples would be, as we have here, and maybe you could just click it one more time because there's one more thing that will come up on this slide, is that just as an example of our Eco Stove, this product is one that we've helped to design and manufacture out of South Africa. It's significantly cheaper than other stainless steel options on the market, and the stainless steel part is in large part because of the fact that we need it to be durable. There's a lot of products on the market that just simply don't last, and that's not something that we're interested in promoting because it actually can dramatically adversely affect the household economics. So this example here is the stove that we're working on, we're targeting at scale, is $20 freight on board in South Africa. The shipping and duties, assuming that there's a VAT exemption, is approximately $2 at scale, $2 for local transport, and then obviously we want to make sure that we're very much focused on the end sales margin, both for ourselves as an organization as well as for the end distributor. Because if they're not going to make a solid margin on this product over something else that they could sell, then it's likely they're not going to sell it. The other bit where we've been doing over the last 2 years is establishing so we can access the carbon markets. This is a highly volatile space, and we certainly don't want our business fully dependent on it, but it is something that could really allow us to move to scale a lot faster if the carbon markets rebound. However, at the current state, they're going to be providing on the lower end of what we think would be carbon revenue. And when I say T0+1, that's you don't see that money. It's a pay-per-performance type thing. You're not going to see that for 12 to 18 months from the time you're set up. Moving to the next slide. Is essentially, I'm just going to just go over this very quickly, is we believe that the true value of what we're trying to do is for the end user, and particularly around their household economics. This slide shows that there's significant savings to be generated once the initial investment is made across the products that we're doing. For time's sake, we'll continue to move on to the next slide, please. Essentially, the way we're looking at this is that for the product sales the three ways we'll make money is the product sales, the carbon revenue, as I said, that we're not basing our business off of, and then the logistics and distribution services, particularly around the biomass sale. And then that will obviously work in conjunction with our overall cost, being the cost of goods sold. The carbon markets are not by any means free to access, so there's significant costs involved with that, but those are all upfront, which we've mainly covered. The distribution network, and then our management and overhead. Next slide, please. These are just some of the main things, and the main ones that we've already kind of talked about is the willingness to pay as well as the ability to distribute. So for the sake of time, could we go to the next slide, please? This is our management team. We have it's a cross of local and international team. We have with what we believe different skill sets that we think can interact quite nicely. We have our director Seri Diallo, and as well as our main advisor and employee Colonel Cisse, who's been in forestry and helps us with the sustainable biomass aspect. Next slide, please. Here are some of the impacts we believe that we'll be able to do by engaging with this over the next 3 years. We believe that we can impact approximately 300,000 households, which would be, with the household size in Senegal is approximately 10, so that's 3 million people. We're looking to create a large number of commission-based sales jobs, as well as dramatically reduce the amount of CO2 that's emitted into the air. And most importantly, as we call an eco line, what we're referring to as eco as household economics, is dramatically reduce the cost of meeting your end energy needs for low-income communities in Africa. Next slide, please. Essentially what we're looking for to get going is there's two types of investments we're looking for. We're looking for a line of credit to purchase products and move it through the cycle, as well as investment in the distribution network, as well as a briquetting factory for using agricultural waste, which we believe is one of the best opportunities to directly address charcoal use, which is one of the main drivers of energy in urban Africa. Next slide, please. And I believe the time is up. So essentially, as a summary, we're seeking $400,000 in financing to reach or impact up to 3 million people over 3 years. Last slide, please. And this This last slide is just a picture of one of our recent demos where we're testing products, and this is one of the customers that's using one of our heat retention cooking sacks that's locally made in Senegal with local fabric. So thank you for the opportunity to present, and that concludes the presentation.